2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of us. And, a couple maybe dropping in late. But we'll be happy to see them anyway. Okay, let's everybody introduce themselves first, then we shall get going. And we'll start off with Chris.
Chris Kadamian, Burbank, California.
Okay. Chase.
Oh, okay. Had some trouble unmuting myself. Hey, I'm Chase. I'm from Baltimore. I trained under Will.
Okay. Good morning, Will.
Morning, Professor. How are you doing? Will Harris from Baltimore.
Okay. Jonathan, are you with us? We'll come back to Jonathan. Gary.
Yeah, Gary Whitus, Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Okay. Darren.
Darren Mellarine, New Orleans, Louisiana.
Okay. And
Good morning, everyone.
I guess that's it right now. Jonathan, where's Jonathan Lines? Where'd he go?
We have Gerald on as well, Sensei.
Pardon?
Looks like Gerald Como is
Gerald,
one.
are you with us? Gerald?
Looks like he's muted.
Right.
Are you with us, Gerald? One way or the other? Ask to unmute. Okay.
He
Oh, I
says
can't
here.
unmute. I can't unmute. I'm here. Okay. Well, we'll do the best we can. Okay, we have some topics here today, and we'll see what we can do with some of them. And the first one is how to work through the hand guard of someone with good hand grappling. This was from a student with ground Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu training, and I teach good hand guard and grappling. I guess, was this from you, Gary?
Yeah, this was from me, and this was a student's question.
Okay. I had to look up hand guard. It's interesting. You get in this process with different sensei, different ru, right? And everybody has different terms for the same thing.
Sensei, I think what they're talking about is hand fighting. So like when you're trying to grab for position and things like that.
It's where you're putting your hands, etc.
Yeah.
And the hand guard for one I looked up, it was like, how you position your hands to keep someone from hitting you, or whether your hands are open or fist and all this other excuse me positioning. But in any case, that's how I interpret it, as what your hands are doing and how you control another person's arms and hands, if they're in a hand, if their hands are up like this or what have you. And so does anyone want to start with this? Or, I have some remarks I could make, but I'll just see whatever anyone else has to say about it.
Yeah, I'll shoot for it. So it depends. I guess to answer the question, I need a little bit more context. Is this from like a offensive grappling standpoint where they're trying to pass somebody's guard and they want to know where they need to put their grips, or is it like defensive so they can know where to strip grips? It sounds like they're trying to pass from the way the question was phrased. They're trying to pass, and the BJJ player is like good with the hand fighting, so they want to know if there's any like kind of techniques that we do that could help with that. I found that like this wrist lock, I think this one's Sankyo. This wrist lock really helps. Another point, it really helps get out of a guillotine choke, because what you have to do is connect your hands to finish the choke. So it really helps to attack the top hand, go 2 hands on one, and apply the Sankyo grip because it literally turns the palm away from the hand. That's a good one. But I find that that one works a lot too, and it acts as like the child in the parent joint hierarchy or whatever, right? So if you can like twist the wrist, or at least so like if they're grabbing here, if you can at least start to twist it, it puts the wrist in a like a unstable position, or at least they can't exert all of the strength that they would be able to use here if you turn their wrist that way. I'm only grabbing with my thumb and whatnot. So I mean, I would tell them to try that, like use our wrist lock techniques as more of like grip weakeners or transitional techniques, as opposed to, like you grab it and you got them.
Okay, Gary, since this was your question, why don't we I understand what Chase is saying, and I'll comment on that eventually. But since you came up with the question, you want to define it or?
Sure. I will elucidate. That's my big word for the day. So yeah, it was primarily from the defensive point of view. So somebody else is coming in, they're being offensive, trying to get some grip or other, and constantly parrying, plucking, controlling, and just being very frustrating, right? You just don't let them get through. You don't get through. In BJJ, they don't do any of the small joint work. That's supposedly illegal. In our niece, yeah, we do all sorts of that stuff. I also taught that you use what we call monkey hands. In other words, not the opposing thumb, because you expose your thumb to getting hurt.
Right.
But here, you get your whole hand and wrist and can do so much. So it's really about teaching them to parry and control. Then their frustration was, how do I get past somebody who knows how to parry and control me? The answer is, you can't. So
You have to distract them. You gotta attack a lower part of the body. You gotta attack something else if you're trying to grab someone who's good at defending you from gripping them.
yeah. Don't poke them in the eye though.
Yeah.
No.
It's been to my experience. I've worked with several BJJ people in the past and currently still do high ranking. And what Gary has said, yes, it's been a long time that they haven't used small joint manipulation. However, they've started to open up to that a little bit more and be a little bit more familiar with specifically wrist locks. So to Crace's credit in what he was trying to explain a little while ago, I found it extremely successful in being able not only to parry and move hands away, but their objective is to grab you somewhere or to get a grip there, and also not to put their hands on the floor. So once they're doing that, I found a tremendous amount of success in using the small joints, which they're not really that familiar with, getting more and more educated on it, but not more familiar with. So when you do if they're just grabbing a lapel, it's no different than if they're standing up. You're just on the floor. So performance things such as Nikai Jo, or as Chase was mentioning, Sankyo or even Ikai Jo when they're on the floor, those things are completely blind to them and they don't even know what they are, and they're moving. You move them easily by using those techniques.
A really interesting technique that's really popping up on like the gi competitive BJJ circuit is when they go in and they grab for the first collar, and then you clamp in, and then you go under and you spin around and you kind of come out with your hand like this. I think it's the first turn for four corners throw. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the Japanese terminology.
Shionagi, but
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So they're stepping around for Shionagi and they're really finishing each other. That I see that technique all the time in gi competition. And like,
right, they're not going into a Shionagi. They're going more into a Sankaijo, which would be more of a vertical wrist lock on that standpoint. But yeah, they are doing it, and it does work out. And so does a Hijikatami. So they're doing wrist press as well.
Yeah, there is. I think we're getting away from the Gary's thing that with respect to this grabbing the gi, this is so hard to demonstrate without another person.
Who you telling?
And I think Drew alluded to it, is when they're grabbing you and you're basically, if you can turn the hand, right now their thumb is up. If you can grab hold with one hand or both hands around the base of their hand and simply turn it almost 180 degrees, so their little finger is up, and then you bring that against your chest, and so that you are bending the wrist this way. They're going to let go, or they're going to have a broken wrist. It's that simple. But ideally, and it's like Darren said, it doesn't matter whether you're standing up or lying down. It's the same technique. And I think what messes up a lot of traditional jiu-jitsu people that aren't used to groundwork, and probably some Brazilian people, jiu-jitsu people, not Brazilian, but Brazilian jiu-jitsu people, is that they're used to the groundwork and they don't see the transition into the standing. And once as a jiu-jitsu, if you accept that most of the stuff you can do standing, not the hip throws and stuff like that, but a lot of the other techniques involving small joints can be done lying down, and they're a lot more effective lying down than they are standing up. You're not a nice person to deal with, and you have a lot of control. The other issue that Gary brought up was, if you have a person who's getting their hand and they don't want whatever they're doing, is we'll come in and if I'm not necessarily interested in grabbing a person's wrist. There's an exception. Okay. As Gary said, I'll just come in and hook, thumb on it, because I don't want to risk injury to them. I'll just hook that wrist, my hand over their wrist, because I want to have some control over what's going on. And if they then allow me to pull me into them, that pulling me into them gives me an opening, because the next easiest joint to get to is the elbow. Okay. And many times if we have a person who we're struggling with and we're concentrating on their wrist, controlling their wrist, this is actually the most movable joint there is. And because you can't control, it's very difficult to control an arm straightening out or bending, because that's the way the muscles are built. But to move the arm sideways is not very difficult, because the muscles aren't built to do that. Okay. So you do have, I guess you call it lateral. You can have a lot of lateral movement. And as Gary said, if you can trap onto the wrist and limit it somewhat, and then get your other hand under their elbow or on top of their elbow, you then can move. And then you can even transition into Drew's thing, because now he's turning the wrist with one hand and the other hand is going to pull down or go up if it's a headlock. Okay. Yeah. Headlock, you want to go up. You're going to get out of this. The other thing that works well, okay, we will use what I call a C grip. And that is usually done, again, it's done to trap the hand or the arm. And the C grip is a loose grip, okay? And all you're trying to do, the person, if they hit or what have you, and you come on, you block, it's just here. And all you're trying to do is trap, so they can't use that hand again. You've got hold of it. And then you can transition from here into anything else you want to go into. But if you've got someone who's, in like this and they're going to punch or what have you, and if you can trap, if you can get Gary's monkey grip, whatever I know what you call it. We don't have it. We just call it a hook. Okay. You get that hook in there with one hand, and then your other hand can come in under their elbow. You've got them. I mean, they're done. Help your-
Another good technique to look into that would serve the same purpose is like a Kimura grip, or they call it the double wrist lock in wrestling. There's a whole system of control-based grappling off of that. It's really interesting to look into.
Yeah, again, what it comes down to is if you know how joints move and you know how muscles move, that gives you a tremendous advantage on the ground or standing up. More so, I think, on the ground, because I've had, and I'm not talking about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but I've had people put me into pins, and if I can get one hand, if they're trying to choke me, and I'm not trying to put another hold necessarily on them, I'm essentially trying to get out of what they have me in. If I can get one hand on their wrist and one hand on their elbow, they're going to go somewhere. And I think that's the key is controlling their movement, not necessarily stopping it, but you're controlling it to some extent. You're limiting, and then going for that elbow, because that will allow you. You can either rotate them over you to your left, go to your right. Okay, you can bring them under. It would be a really klutzy or awkward shoulder lock, but you could roll into that. But I think that the key is on everything. You're bringing these techniques, whether it's the elbow, if you're rotating the elbow, everything is going in a circle towards your center as you rotate. And I think that's the key, is keeping your body behind whatever your rest of your body is doing. And Chris is sitting there quietly, as is Will. What is going through their minds here?
Well, if I understand the scenario correctly, it sounds like it's an offensive thing that's trying to take place. You're trying to penetrate somebody's defenses, right? And I've just learned, oddly enough, that personal strategy is sometimes not very different than like a military strategy, where a military is trying to siege a fortified a castle or something. So there's several ways, that you escalate those types of approaches. The simplest way is sometimes you just knock on the door. Maybe they'll open, right? Maybe they're gullible enough to open and you make your way in. If not, you try to force the door open. If that doesn't work, you look for a window. If that doesn't work, you look for any other, a chimney, whatever, to go in. And if you can't find an opening, then sometimes you just have to starve them out, right? You have to wait until eventually they have to come out.
Yes.
So that's kind of how I think, and that's how I teach. I always say we're opportunists. So, take advantage, try the basic ways. And if that's not, if, there's no opening there, then you just have to wait it out. Sometimes you can't be in a rush to do things. Eventually they're going to relax, or they're going to get tricked into something or whatever, and open up, which really also brings another point here, which is, I think, is important, is that the intent of what you're doing. And I know I tend to go towards that a lot, but it's an important thing. So for example, in our dojo, I always emphasize self-defense. And there's very rare situations where you're on the offensive in a self-defense situation, because you're usually responding to something happening to you or about to happen to you. So the scenario here is more sport oriented, where you're trying to score or choke somebody out or something. So maybe you don't have the luxury of waiting, for things to happen, and you kind of have to, push your way in. So when the arena changes and the purpose changes, the strategy changes a little bit too. And that's, I think it's important to keep that in mind, is the perspective of why you're doing what you're doing. That's my thoughts on it.
You brought up two really important things. One was the word relax, and number two is wait it out. Okay, and I found that if someone has me in a hold, or whatever you want to call it, or they're trying to attack, if the key to success in any martial art is to be able to relax, and particularly if it's a grappling type situation, so that you can, if you can relax, you can feel what their body is doing. Okay, and you may have to wait for a moment, but if you can relax, you can usually find a way to find an opening. And that's the hardest part. And you also said, if it's a situation where time is of the essence, it's a match, and that may be something else. But a lot of it is just being able to, lack of a better phrase, keep your cool for a moment and try to sense what the other person is actually doing. And that may give you an opening or a direction to go. So I think those are two really valid points to bring up. Will, comment?
I agree with what Chris was saying. It's clearly from the questions is posed from a sport I guess vantage point, for lack of a better term. In self-defense, you wouldn't really worry about it. If you're struggling to get a grip on somebody from a self-defense standpoint and they're trying to get away, let them get away. Why are you in the fight? But in a sport environment, obviously that can't happen. So I go back to my earlier comment where take what the defense gives you. If you can't get a hold of a grip on the upper body, attack the lower body.
Okay.
And then when they defend that, then you can switch tactics.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, the key is that the key is in self-defense, you're trying to get away from the person. You're not
Right.
trying to engage them.
Right.
When I said, hooking onto the wrist and in and letting them pull you into them, I meant that as a defensive move. You're going to move in, and then you're going to do whatever you do to end the situation and get away. I don't care to mess around with the person on the ground or standing up, because the longer you are close to them, the greater your chances of getting hurt. And I have an aversion to that. So, I think I think we need to, like you said, we need to clarify whether it's self-defense or offense in a competitive situation, which is different. But I don't like to have a person, if they're attacking me, I don't like to have their hands free, particularly if they're right-handed. I like to be able to trap their right hand. If they're left-handed, that's okay too, because I'm left-handed. But
yeah, from a defensive standpoint, we do a lot of drills from I guess originated from small circle jiu-jitsu that we picked up from Professor Tony Maynard with his American combat style, which is heavily influenced by Wally J's small circle.
Yeah,
a lot of with trapping the hands and the fingers, manipulating the small joints, working all that stuff, which you can't do in competition, but outside of competition, it's some great techniques.
right. And that has to be clarified, because I know Seki's jiu-jitsu was very clean. It was polite for the most part. When I worked with Hal Brocious, it was a different approach. It's a lot of the same techniques, same movements, but how you get into them, if you got to stick a finger in their ear and twist it, or up their nose and twist it, or grab various parts of their body to get them to move, that's what you do. It's self-defense. And his approach was that you know, this person who's attacking you, they're not a moral person. They're not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. And there's no reason. Your chief disadvantage on the street is that if you've been trained to be a quote unquote moral person, and there are things you don't do because it's not socially appropriate. And as I train my students, there's nothing that's socially inappropriate if you have to defend yourself. You can deal with that later.
Yeah, your attacker's already broken that social contract. So,
pardon?
Your attacker's already broken that social contract. So all bets are off at that point.
I mean, you know, it's if you can be around to discuss it afterwards, you're okay. But anyway, okay. Anything else we want to do with this topic before we go on to the next one, which is the second one is do you want to end the situation on the ground, go down to the ground with your attacker, or do you prefer to end it standing up?
Is that it? Is that the whole
Another
thing?
on the floor.
Someone is saying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu training is for mat exercises. Brazilian and old style starts on the street. I think all conflicts start standing. Nobody's
Not too many fights start while you're sleeping next to somebody.
Pardon?
Not too many of these fights that happen while you're laying next to them in bed.
No,
So
no.
you're probably going to be standing.
But even Hal Brosh has had some good rules for, you know, things you do not do in. Bear with me. Things you do not do in bed that can, or things you can do in bed if you're in that situation and you are attacked. And he wasn't nice about it.
Sure.
And none of them are legal in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Or probably any other.
Or probably most
martial
competition.
art. But anyway.
I would say, I think from the general tone of the question, it sounds like you're in an altercation, and the question is whether to intentionally take the fight to the ground. I would say no. If you're in a self-defense standpoint, you want to stay on your feet as much as possible, as it gives you way more options, right? Your main goal is to take away your opponent's ability to see, breathe, or move. You go to the ground, you're severely limiting your own movement, at least in one direction. And plus, you don't know. There's not a referee standing there to stop anybody else from joining the melee. So I would say the ground skills are still important to know, because you may very well wind up on the ground, but you need to use those ground skills to gain control of your opponent and get back to your feet, because your whole goal is to get away to get to safety.
Okay. Any other comments before I step in, or?
Yeah, to piggyback off of that, I definitely agree that going to the ground in a street altercation, especially when you don't know all of the variables around the situation, is definitely like not the best idea. The only thing there are only a couple of ways I could like justify it. One is if you obviously knew it was just a one-on-one kind of altercation. How you know that information isn't really relevant, but you know that it's only going to be this one person you're fighting. So that, and you have to be really good at controlling from the top position. Since our style is very throw heavy, it would be in our best, and we have to know how to control the top position, because we put someone underneath of us, right? We put them in the bottom position. So on those notes, I could see not the justification, but the necessary skills required to like have that be an option to you.
So there was an old phrase, charge a gun, run away from a knife. You can only run away if you're on your feet, right? Because the knife only reaches so far. Gun reaches very far, so that's when you close. And whether you start standing, if you close standing, it's probably going to go to the ground. But anyway, that was it.
Gary, I literally had like I don't want to say a nightmare, but like I was shook at a couple days ago at the idea of like having to grapple somebody with a knife. Oh my gosh, that scares me so much because you could be doing all the right things and then and then that's it, it's done. Oh,
Yeah, I think I know from my and my students' experiences. In a street situation, I've only had one student that's ended up going to the ground, and that was to maintain a joint lock. Every other situation, whether it be a judo type throw or an aikido type throw, the attacker was injured either in the process of the throw or when they hit the ground, and that ended the confrontation. I mean, I've been in a couple of situations where I've had to deal with a person on drugs. They are very difficult to deal with because sometimes they don't feel pain that much, and you have to apply, which is why I'm a great believer in small muscle movement, because you have to be able to get to certain areas of their body to create enough pain, but you don't want to go down to the ground with them. You need to control them standing up, and you have to, as Chris said, you have to be able to feel what they're doing, number one. And amazingly, I found that there are times you can actually communicate with a person during a fight verbally. They may be swearing at you and you may be swearing back at them in the process. But you can actually get it. It's amazing. And I found this more with people that are on drugs. You can get this I'm not saying conversation, but you can give verbal commands. They may not follow them, or they may say, where you can put it, and give you some other advice while they're trying to get away from you, or, they're trying to attack you. But even that verbal conversation is a distraction to them. But you've got to control them physically. And I would much rather do it standing than on the ground if I could avoid it. Unless I have them in some sort of a control hold. And one of the things I started doing about 10, 20 years ago, as I got more involved with law enforcement, is if I put a person down, I don't want them face up. I don't want them face down. I want them on their side with their back to me. Because if their back is to me, they can't do much. Even if they're face down and you're on top of them, their back is to you and you're relatively safe. It's when they can get to you with one or two hands or one or 2 feet that's dangerous. Which is why I don't like going down to the ground, because you can end up on the bottom, which is, depending on what it could be a good or bad situation. So I think I would prefer to deal with a person standing up. It's just easier. It's easier to move them if you have to move them.
Sensei, to lend credence to that, I actually teach at a school, a special ed school, where we're allowed to use therapeutic restraints when the kids start to have like
I like that term.
crisis. And yeah, it's the same thing. We never want to go to the floor because it's a lot of paperwork, right? But also, I don't know, our restraint system allows us to control them pretty handily on the ground. It's literally just our standing techniques just on the ground. So it's fine. But yeah, same thing. We start all of our things standing up. There's no need to do anything else. And it's nice to always have like a partner, but there are also some single person techniques, right? And they all start from standing, and they all offer a great deal of control. And I can't tell you how many times, like, if I could just put you in a little twist right here, but yeah, it all works the same.
I think you bring up an important point, because I faced this also as when I was a teacher, even in dealing with adult gang members on campus and stuff like that. You can't haul off and do whatever you want to do. You do have you have to exhibit some control. I mean, I've never had an administrator say to me, you shouldn't have done that, or that's not right, or you shouldn't put your hands on the student, yada yada yada. But if you use good judgment, and the same thing happens out in public, if it looks like you're using some restraint, or your moves don't look, overly aggressive, you're going to be in a better position when, if the situation ever goes to court and there are witnesses, etc., you don't want to look like you're, well, the guy's down and you're jumping up and down on his head 6 or 7 times.
Yeah.
You have your responsibility as a martial artist in terms of self-defense is you've defended yourself, you have control of the situation. That's where it has to stop. Unless it's a life or death situation.
This sort of comes back to the first topic, and you were talking about the elbow controls and the wrist and all that, because the best thing, what I love, it's just fun, is the come along. It's a standing lock, and they're going wherever I want them to go.
Yeah, the come alongs are good. I will usually use a come along, and then my other hand, if usually I'll try to just have one hand hung up with the come along. The other hand will be on a pressure point on the other side of their body, because I'm a great believer in using different pain points, because that way they can't concentrate on one thing. And no, maybe it's not playing nice, but to me it's a safety factor. It's kind of like your backup. If you're in that situation. Okay, we got off of this topic. Okay, reaching. Suppose there is you, me, and a rubber gun or knife on the floor. I think we need to take the word rubber out of there. Any thoughts on reaching for a weapon that's lying around? I will have to show you.
In all honesty, I don't understand the setup. I really don't even understand the setup.
Okay, I think
we're opponents, we're friends, why are we in this room? Where's the exit?
I think we're fighting each other, and somehow a knife got, someone had a knife and it got knocked out of their hand and it's on the floor. Same thing with the gun. And I think the issue is, do you reach for that weapon?
I don't know. I feel like you kick the weapon away, or you kick them in the face while they're reaching for the weapon. Right? Am I underthinking this?
Yeah. There's okay. As far as my attitude is, if the weapon is close enough to get hold of it without reaching is the problem, because that you're committing your thoughts or actions to something else other than immediately protecting yourself, and you can get hurt that way. But if the weapon is nearby, your prime concern should be to secure that weapon so the other person can't use it. You don't want to be in a, unless it's a life or death situation and they happen to have a knife or gun too. You don't want to be in that position. I've seen two ways to secure a knife. One of them, actually, one of them was simply to take the weapon, and I don't have a knife. We'll use a pair of scissors. That's good enough. Okay. One is if you're going to grab the weapon, ideally you don't grab it. This would be I guess the hilt. No, the hilt would be where the guard is. You don't grab the knife this way and put it in your pocket, because then your prints are ideally all over the weapon. And it can, it can look like you use this weapon, or you might be able to. If you simply grab it in the middle with thumb and index, you can't stab a person this way. It doesn't work. Okay. But you can slide it into a pant pocket. Okay. Or you could slide it under your belt behind you. Okay. The downside of this is you could cut yourself. And if you get into a ground situation, the other person could get the knife out of your pocket or out from under your belt. It's not secure. Okay. The other argument is to take, I've seen, again, this is from another law enforcement agency, is you take the weapon and you put it under your arm, put it under your arm this way, so the blade is sticking out from behind. Okay. And they say, this is how you secure the weapon. Anyone see the problem? I mean, if someone attacks you from behind, they're going to get cut. Okay, maybe. Okay. If your arm and body is strong enough to hold the knife in place, what's the other problem? I mean,
You're taking that arm out of the fight.
You're taking that arm out of the fight because it's trapping. You can't do much with unless Gary hooks it and traps it. Yeah, you're taking that arm out of the fight. Okay. And you're taking most of your body out of the fight too, because you're using so much muscle mass to hold on to this weapon. So maybe the question is, should you reach for a weapon?
Well, then that just makes it really situational then, right? Because maybe you do, maybe you don't. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that aren't even brought into this question. You can't answer the question the way it's asked.
For me, it's pretty simple. If it gives me an advantage, I'm gonna reach for it.
Okay.
I don't care what it is, gun, knife, chair. If it's gonna give me an advantage, then I'm gonna use it.
Okay. I guess the question is, how far do you reach, or is it?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's we don't know based on the question.
Yeah.
I'm not really focusing on reach like it's on the other side of the block or room or wherever you're at. I'm assuming it's within a hand's reach.
An arm's reach.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'd probably go.
Real quickly, just some of the context of this was from situations in parking lots at night in Detroit, right? And it's whether it's a knife or a gun on the ground or a piece of rebar or a rock, right? That's the tough situation. And the question was, how do you translate that to training that you can do in the dojo? Because we're not going to fill it up with cinder blocks and rocks and car bumpers and crap, but there's stuff that's the other guy is going to reach for on the ground, or that you can reach for. And so it's working with all that stuff that's around you. So that was kind of the context of this. And then how do you translate that really crummy nighttime uncertain situation into training people where we train them in a safe environment?
Wait, hold on. I got the answer for you right now. So there's this guy on YouTube. He's called Hard to Hurt, and he has he runs a kickboxing studio, but all of his videos is from the tactical self-defense standpoint. He's a proponent of training combat sports is an effective way for you to build martial skill, and then you learn self-defense concepts. So I'm gonna put his channel in the thing. So when he does like self-defense tool reviews, and what he'll do is he'll take it into his gym and he'll do like live sparring rounds with it. So all the time he's testing a gun. All the time it falls out of his hand. All the time the baton falls out of his hand. And he like has to talk about those types of situations. So here's his YouTube channel in the chat. Go check him out. It's good. It's good. I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, I think as Chris said, you know, if something is available and you can use it as a weapon, and you're in a self-defense situation where your life is at risk, you reach for it and grab it and use it if you can. I think we, on the one hand, we need to get away from solely the knife and gun as weapons. I've done some seminars where I show up with a set of kitchen tools, and you give a person a soup spoon and say, defend yourself with this, and they look at you like you're some sort of idiot. But I say, just extend your hand, make the soup spoon part of your arm, your hand, and you know, they play with it for a while and they begin to realize that what they're holding in their hand is largely irrelevant. They can use it for a lot of blocking techniques. It's I say it, you need to get them out of the mindset that they're helpless. Spatulas are fantastic weapons. Cutting and hitting, okay? One of them jokingly said, well, if I hit the person on the forehead with the spatula, is it going to leave a mark? And I said, probably, and they'll be easy to find.
If not, hit them harder.
Pardon?
If it didn't, you got to hit them harder.
Right. Well, I mean, but anyway, but the point, you know, the other issue is I gave two things. Number one, the gun. Students need experience, and I'm not advocating gun ownership. Students need experience facing a real gun and doing techniques on a person with a real gun. Okay, it's a whole different ball game as compared to looking at a rubber gun. Okay, psychologically, and real guns have sharp edges. You do get cut on occasion, things of that sort. They need to have that experience. It doesn't mean you have to use real guns all the time, but once in a great while, it's a real asset to learning, which is why we require that at some point between first and fifth down, a person have take a gun safety course, because most people have no idea what a gun sounds like or looks like when it fires. And to be confronted with that on the street for the first time is a real shock to people. And you've got to get, you know, you've got to get them beyond that. Okay, so one thing you might consider, even if it's a sage gun, I had an old 45 that, you know, you do demonstrations in places, weird stuff. I've had weird stuff end up in my duffel bag. I ended up with a 45 automatic once, really old one. It finally fell apart about 5 years ago. There was no way to hold it together. I've come up with another one. Someone left it may have been a stage gun because there's a pin through the barrel to keep it from firing bullets, but that could be taken out. But it's, you know, the students need that experience. The other thing I don't use rubber knives. I use wood knives. Now, when I used to do demonstrations, I would have a real hunting knife, steel. I'm not totally stupid. I ground down the edge and the tip, you know, so it couldn't cut. but that still forces you into a different mindset than a rubber knife. For my students, I use wooden knives. They're just as cheap as a rubber knife, and they last for years. Rubber knives last about 3-4 hours in my classes. The only danger with a wooden knife is you want to make sure you file down the tip, make it rounded. Because I had one of my brown belts once decades ago who decided to stop a wooden knife with his hands like this, and it just ripped open the inside of his hand. It looked horrible. Fortunately, there was no nerve damage. And I had very good plastic surgery, and you can almost notice the scar on his hand. But you have to be as realistic as you can with your students, because it's a mindset they have to have, or experience they have to have.
You really need to drill in the safety aspect of that too. If you're going to bring a real weapon in, you got to have someone qualified to teach safe handling and how to check to verify that nothing's chambered, cartridges out, everything. Every single time it's passed from one person to the next. And I understand that's why we require the gun safety force.
Yeah.
But it's just amazing what people that don't regularly handle firearms, what they do when you handle one.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I was for it was you just have to have that awareness.
Yep.
I mean, if you see someone who's been cut or shot, that changes your perspective. And I'm not saying you should go out and have it done to yourself or just to have the experience, but it's a different mindset than saying, okay, today we're going to practice knife attack. We're going to use rubber knives. And that's all the student ever practices with. Because anyone can play with a rubber knife. Almost anyone can play with a wooden knife. You give them a steel blade, even if you filed it down or ground it down to where it's dull, it's still a different mindset.
We had something similar where I just switched the club that we normally use with a baseball bat, and people just reacted totally different to it.
Yeah.
When they saw
I
the baseball bat.
I was going to bring that one up when they said, now the opponent gets a baseball bat.
Okay. What I've gotten so many good ideas from my students decades ago. We used to use, back in the 60s, early 70s, we used to use a wooden club, and we just didn't swing hard. Or we put foam around it and wrap it in duct tape and, not hit hard because it could do some damage. One of my students then one day walked in with a golf club tube cut in half. He says, "Sensei, try this." And I've used them ever since. They're cheap. You cut the metal ring off one end, cut them in half. They're indestructible. You can swing full force, which is what's important, because that way the student learns how to block a full force club attack. And if it hits them, it makes an embarrassing popping sound in the head. I've never had a student hurt by being hit with a golf club tube. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's in the golf bag. You have your golf clubs, and to protect the golf clubs, they have long plastic tubes. And if you go to a used sporting goods store, you can usually buy them for like 50 cents or 75 cents a piece. They're dirt cheap, and they'll last even and beyond your life. But they're just a great tool to train with, because they, in my book, if they allow the student to swing full force, they require the defender to block properly. And if you end up hitting the person in the head, It's just an embarrassing popping sound from the tube, not their head opening, but anyways. But anyway, but there are, there's stuff around that can be used that's relatively safe. Okay. Next topic. 2 versus 1, 3 versus 2 strategy. See Marine Corps line. Has anybody looked at the Marine Corps line book or anything?
I'll jump in.
Okay.
That was my kind of question. It was the only good instruction manual for practical way of 1 against 2, 2 against 3. The Marine Corps stopped publishing and teaching from the book because it was too brutal and practical. I haven't been able to find a copy for 20 years, but it's the strategy for if there's 1 of you and 2 of them, or 3 of them. Actually, I've seen you did a video of 1 on 2. I remember that, Sensei. And so it's, so I had instructors that said, oh, run in between them. I thought that's the stupidest thing in the world. I want one stuck behind the other one. Anyway, so the Marine Corps, they had this great manual. It's, if anybody can find it, it'd be wonderful. But it's just you're not one-on-one. We're not playing games anymore. So that's where the question came from.
All right, well, Seki's, I'll go back to Seki's approaches. He said if you have 2 or more attackers, you don't have to be nice anymore. And you literally have 2 choices, other than running like hell, if you can. Your 2 choices are to use one person as a shield, trap them, lock them up, and use them as a shield so that you can get yourself safely out of the situation. Or 2, do enough serious damage to the first one to create reasonable doubt in the others, that they too might end up with this amount of damage to them. Okay. Are they both justifiable? Probably yes. Is the second option more difficult to defend against in court? Probably less, yes, unless you've got witnesses that are on your side. So that was his approach. You either trap one and use them as a shield, or you cause enough damage to make the others think twice about attacking you. And
In my old dojo, we used to spar. We used to do a couple of rounds of MMA sparring. It was light, obviously, but we would do 2-on-1 every now and again. It was so fun. But yeah, for sure. I've personal experience. It was always better for me to maneuver a way around one of the other ones, maybe like the one who didn't have as good as footwork as I did, which also lends credence to how important footwork is, and being able to traverse your attackers instead of standing in front of them. But yeah, an advantage in footwork allowed me to get around one and then create the space between us.
Okay. Just to mention that, I'll go into some things we've done in the dojo when I've had enough people do it. Street situation, one of the things I have my students be aware of, I say, you always need to watch out for the Chihuahua. Gary's laughing here. Okay, anybody? And so is Chris to some extent. You got a smile out of him. And Darren, anybody know what watch out for the Chihuahua means? What do Chihuahuas do if they're attacking a human?
They bite your ankle, and they're little.
They're little, they attack your heels, right? Okay, they're an annoyance, they're a distraction. from the Rottweiler, who's the person you really need to worry about. Okay. Yeah. So that's why one thing I always tell my students is watch out for the Chihuahuas. There's no, the other thing is, I would have, we would have a thing called in the class, line of fear. I'd take the brown belts, maybe purple belts, but brown belts and black belts, and we do what's called a circle of fear. You got to give this stuff stupid names, keep students interested. But what it is you have circle of fear is essentially you have one person in the middle, and you may have 3 or 4 people around him in a circle, and you give each of them a number. Okay. And these people will attack the person in the center with whatever attack they want. Weapons, no weapons, whatever they happen to have in hand. And you can start out slowly, like 1, 3, 2, to see how the defender is doing with the speed of the attacks. And eventually you speed it up to the point where the attacker no longer can defend himself. Okay. And this is just you're obviously not looking at quality of technique here, but it puts a student in a situation where they are, eventually they're going to be defeated, but it helps them develop a realization of what they can do. And the controlling the attacker to prevent another attacker from coming at you comes into play, and they learn the validity of doing that. So that's one way of doing it. And another way is to have if you have like 10 or 12 people you can do this with, you have 2 circles, one that's going clockwise and then a circle inside that's going counterclockwise. And at some point you just snap your fingers and you attack whoever you're nearest. But that's still only a 1-on-1 situation. But students did like the one where the quote unquote, the circle of fear, because it was sort of a reality check. And we all need that. Darren, you're being very quiet today.
I'm sorry, Sensei. I was multitasking on a couple of things, so
No, that's okay.
Certainly engaged in everything.
I tend to multitask too at times. Any thoughts or I'm sorry, didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, I'm good. I'm good with it. It's fine. It's certainly fine.
Okay.
Sensei, I'll jump in, and then I have to run. We have a class I have to go teach. But this topic has, I think, come up before, and every good self-defense system should really primarily think of self-defense against multiple people. Unless you're in a sport arena and there's other people around, you should always assume there could be more than one person, trying to hurt you. So if you look historically, every martial arts system really compensated by training the people to fight against multiple opponents, because most of the stuff from the old days was for the battlefield. So in the battlefield, you have multiple people coming at you potentially from all directions. And then, as things became more civilian based, that type of mentality carried on until some of the stuff became sports, where it was one-on-one and a more contained, environment. So the strategy is, you're right. I actually remember the circle of fear and all that from the old days. Now we call it, Simcoms or Randori. But we do, pretty much every class. At the end of every class, you go up against multiple people in our dojo, and for similar reasons. But the main thing is again, you realize you can't defend your back, your side, and your front all at the same time. And the realization is, our bodies are designed for physical things. and time is linear. So our mind really processes things linear. We even design computers this way. They just work faster than our minds do. So there's always the appearance that you can multitask, but you're really doing one thing at a time. Maybe you can do it faster. So there's the appearance of multi. It's like juggling, right? It's still going kind of in one circle, but you're handling one or two things at the same time, but the rest are out there. So it looks like there's multiple things. So I always describe it this way. If I hold my hand up this way, you're facing 5 opponents. If you're in the middle, it's a lot. It's not going to work no matter what you do. So you have to, mobility is important, and you have to move in such a way where it looks like this. So now you're only handling one thing at a time, where they're almost lining up to get against you, kind of like the shield concept, and that's really the only way. Of course, from a self-defense perspective, break the circle and get out. You have no obligation to stay there and fight everybody. Your job is stay alive, is to stay safe. So if it's real self-defense, get out, let them chase you, if that's what it comes down to.
Right. Okay.
So anyway, I have to run. I apologize, but we got a class.
point, Chris.
No problem.
Yeah, great seeing you guys. Take care.
Take care.
Sensei, and if I can, I'll try to jump in a little bit. Just summarize a couple of topics that we've talked not only during this session, but in some previous sessions as well. For our classes, we certainly do the multiple attacker versus one individual. We try to every class. So pretty much every class we do that in Randori or situational based, some sort of attack. And we do that in an effort to, in my approach, I always say, I want to stay off the floor. So one of the topics that we talked about today is, going to the ground or standing up. And my preference, and I think in any real life situation, is whatever you can do to stay off the floor is the best case scenario. Unfortunately, a lot of times in reality, those type of situations end up on the floor, and you have to be able to defend yourself in some sort of effort to either get up. And then the next part is, okay, now when I'm getting up, or even if I'm on the floor, is there multiple people that I'm being challenged with? So then you need to be able to defend yourself. And what do you do in those types of scenarios? So at that point, you try to have either using the line method, where you're dealing with one individual at a time, or using another as a barrier. And then you're going back to, in one of the other sessions that we talked about, in tolerance and application, and how much pressure do you apply in application. And if it's a real life scenario, okay, I need to terminate, but just because I'm terminating, and that doesn't mean terminating the individual, but if you're performing a technique and you're breaking things, not all the time does the individual that you're applying those techniques to, even though it is effective, do they feel that pain threshold immediately, because the adrenaline is going. And so there's still a threat. So that doesn't mean that you terminated one of the attackers, you've injured one of them. They may not feel that at that moment. So then you're still dealing with that individual, whether their capacity to attack you is limited or not. You still have the multiple threats there. And then the next scenario is weapons. And in my experience and in my understanding, is anything that is other than my own physical body is an extension to myself, which is considered a weapon, whether it's the spatula or the knife that we were using today, or a t-shirt that I've taken off my body. Anything that I could use in addition to my own physical body is something that I can use in some sort of effort to be an extension of my body, whether you want to call that a weapon or something else. Just in summary, hopefully that kind of wraps up a bunch of the topics.
Yeah, it's you. I think you're saying very valid in terms of you need to be aware of those things that are around you that you can use as weapons to protect yourself with. It can be something as innocuous as a chair. And surprisingly, Hal Brocious even taught techniques that you could use his chair if you were sitting down. But and then if you go back to Seki, he taught us, you know, yeah, we did techniques lying down, we did them standing up, but he had us many times. If we were sitting around waiting to come up, he would have us sitting in Sutemi Waza, formal sitting position, facing the person next to us, doing the techniques, going through the motions. And that's to get you to realize that you don't have to be standing up to do the techniques. Okay, you're not helpless halfway up. It's a matter of keeping your cool, so to speak, for lack of a better phrase. But all of that requires practice. And I think this is what we're stressing here and everything, is that whatever you do, it requires enough practice so that it's automatic, so that you respond automatically without saying, damn, what am I going to do? I've never had to do a Teinagi from a sitting position. Or, you know, I've never, someone's kicking me. What do I do if I'm lying down or sitting? You know, students need the experience, and that's the hard part.
And I agree with that, Sensei. To practice repetitively in the same techniques over and over and over and over and over and over. And I can continue to say it again and again and again and again, right? To where we learn it, to where it becomes second nature and not having to think about it in your response.
Right. Going back, and I'm going to go back to Gary here. Many years ago, when I was teaching junior high, we had a teacher who should not have been given, what do you call it? What is it protects teachers? I can't think of the term.
Tenure.
But we had a wussy principal at the time, and he got tenure, and I was a union rep, and I had to represent this guy so many times. It was just pathetic. And the last year that he was there, before we had a new principal who finally got him. But apparently a couple of my jujitsu kids were bad mouthing him between lockers. They didn't realize that he was there. And so he came up behind pushed one of my kids against the locker. I saw the whole thing. And so the kid comes off with his hands up like this, which is what they're trained to do. I don't want to fight. And the teacher says, oh, so you want to fight me, huh? And he grabs the kid by the shoulder and says, okay, we're going up to the office. Then he sees me there and he says, I want you to come with me. And I said, okay. So in any case, as this kid is being taken to the office, he turns around to me and said, and I got to do this standing up, because he's being grabbed by the shoulder, and he looks over to me and he says, he takes his hand back and he says, because the guy's elbow was down there, he says, should I do? He looks at me and does this, and I said, no. Which would be, it would put the teacher into her coming along. And after he had his temper tantrum with the principal and told the principal what he did, then the principal had me come in and he says, okay, Mr. Kirby, what really happened? So this guy's credibility was, anyway, so, but you know, things do have to be automatic reactions. And that's the whole key. It doesn't matter what martial art you teach. If you're teaching self-defense, it has to be automatic reaction. Anyway,